Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. If this is your first Synchron Live event, welcome. If you're returning for a second or even third or fourth Synchron Live event, welcome. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is going to be a great discussion. I'm not going to get too deep into the pleasantries so that our speakers have plenty of time to talk today. Let's see. So there is one little housekeeping thing. If you see the CC closed captioning on your screen, that's a LinkedIn thing. So just go to the CC at the bottom of the video screen and you can set that to off if that's something that bothers you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic on. I think let's start with Anne, move on to Justin, and then Sarang, if you guys could just give a brief introduction of yourself and who you are and your role at Synchron, and then we could just jump right into the conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Justine. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you guys here virtually together. Wherever you are, hi, good morning, good evening, good day. My name is Annalise. Everyone calls me Anne. Feel free to chime in with Anne. And I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Synchron since 2 years, based out of Singapore. So dialing in at 11 p.m. SGT, wherever it is for you. Justin, I know it's fairly still early for you, so we like to do this. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I think happy to contribute as well to hopefully an interesting discussion for the audience.
Okay, thanks, Anne. I'm Justin Konopask. I'm the Director of Industry Solutions. As Anne said, I'm in a completely different time zone in California, so got my morning coffee here and my nice little Synchron mug, I could say. But in this role at Synchron, my responsibility, as well as Sarang's, will introduce himself in a moment, is really to try to take our solutions and align it to the industry trends, market trends that we're seeing, and the voice of the customer. So looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Justin. And hi, everyone. My name is Sarang Sambari. I'm the Senior Director of Industry Solutions, and Justin gave a little bit of background into what our team does. I probably have the easiest time zone here. I'm based in Boston, so it's 10 o'clock here, so easy for me. But look, we're very excited for the LinkedIn Live session today, which is really focused on the World Economic Forum and how that aligns to some things that are happening in the aftermarket service lifecycle. And look, before we get into the discussion today, I mean, look, the World Economic Forum just had their annual meeting in January in Davos. And look, I got to say, I'm extremely excited. I don't think I've ever worked with a chief revenue officer before that is part of the World Economic Forum. And Anne, I think that's an absolutely amazing accomplishment. And I think even for our audience, I think they would love to understand just how you started working with the group and some of the different things that you've done with the organization.
Thank you, Sarang, and thanks really for these kind words. I must say, I remember that day when I received an email saying that I would be part of the Young Global Leaders community at the WEF, we call it, the World Economic Forum in 2021. I actually could not really believe what was happening. I mean, I tried my luck, I must say, in my previous company just to engage in the WEF as I was really seeking for a new form of enablement and getting exposed to different topics. Good old tech, since 20 years is really exciting. I mean, we'll talk about this, but there's so much more in this world, right? That drives us probably to do what we do on a day-by-day basis, and that provides money and financial stability today. But we ultimately probably want to connect to a bigger purpose. And I was always looking in my career so far to connect to leadership possibilities and being better leaders and growing better leaders, but also contributing to the greater good of the society and obviously, our economy and our world overall. So I felt that the Young Global Leadership community would allow me to connect with inspirational, young leaders around the world. And I must say, throughout the 2 years, I had to undergo a little bit of a warm-up phase during the COVID times. I think we all felt that it was probably difficult to connect to new people virtually, and the WEF tried really hard, but I think I got stuck in too many probably Teams and Zoom meetings here with Synchron in the last 2 years. But the moment that, we had the possibility to meet, I mean, this community came together and we've been starting to collaborate and debate and engage in projects and discussions and form this extremely tight bond of people, inspirational people living and working and influencing around the world. And I had the opportunity now to meet that group twice. Yeah, we met in our annual meeting in August in Geneva last year. And now at the WEF, a selection of us again. And so the way that, to answer your question in terms of how I got basically into that group, was actually an application to the forum, and put forward reasons why I should be considered in this 5-year membership that subsequently followed on by a lifelong alumni membership with the YGL group. And no more young global leaders, probably, but old global leaders, as some joke. And I'm just right mid in the program. It's super exciting. Everyone can put their applications forward and look into the details. But you have really a great connection, great mix of opportunities in connecting with people, in educational parts, and contributing to projects at the same time. And it is at your own pace, at your own possibilities to contribute time and effort and energy into that. So I'm still at the start, I would call, but Davos already was, definitely a once in a lifetime experience for me. For sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's amazing story. And look, I don't know about old economic, we'll call them experienced economic leaders. But look, I was on the website last week and just looking at some of the different meetings and different discussion topics that went on. And look, I thought the overall theme of the meeting was really interesting as well. Cooperation in a fragmented world, right?
Yeah.
And I want to read one line that I took off the website. It said, "The world today is at a critical inflection point. The sheer number of ongoing crises calls for bold collective action." Mm-hmm. And I think everyone today is just dealing with, different information about the economy. I mean, look, if you turn on CNBC here in the US, if you watch it for 15 minutes, you'll have everyone talk from, look, we're going into a recession, we're going to a depression, to everything is fine, everything is okay. So, I wanted to get, your thoughts on that too. And, as you've met with all these different leaders with, government backgrounds, business backgrounds, civil society, I mean, how were all the discussions at the annual meeting? What were the different things that you talked about as you look at the overall health of the economy, everything from recession concerns to inflation, deflation? What was everyone talking about?
Yeah, you had it really nicely put, Sarang. I also thought that the theme was really, really hitting the mark. I think there's so many things going on in this world, and it feels like we're stumbling from one thing, which was COVID, at some point in time, into the next thing, which is inflation. And now people were talking about recession, and this is just a fraction of it. And I just came back from my vacation from New Zealand, and there we talked a lot about cyclones and flooding and disasters, and obviously how you prevent these things, and climate change, right? So there's so much going on, and then there's things that obviously accompany us since a long time around diversity and inclusion, and how we help our society to become really better in their ways to include and interact with everyone, really, to participate. So I guess it was easy to fill 5 days, I would say, sure. With all of this that was going on. And what I really liked was that one dimension being the international dimension, right? I mean, there's people from really literally around the world, wherever you can imagine, from places really remote, to come to actually the forum and to contribute with their knowledge, with their expertise, with their opinions to the discussions in order to foster dialogue. But also, the mixture of obviously WEF being by itself non-for-profit, NGO, you have them bringing people and organizations coming together, representing obviously more economic stakeholders, and then obviously heads of states that are more in a regulatory capacity. So that by itself fosters a lot of diversity in the discussion, which is the beauty, I think, of the WEF. And for me, the biggest takeaway out of all of this is, whilst we have all of these issues around the world that we have to tackle through. I believe truly, as long as there is dialogue, that there is hope and that there are solutions out there. The moment that the world shuts down on dialogue, on conversations, that's usually situations of war, right? You don't talk any more solutions. You act in a violent way, and therefore I really left Davos with a sense of hope in what I heard, as there's an amazing amount of people contributing to address these issues. I think there's a lot of amazing projects that are going on in order to help the society and us becoming a better world, and encouraging to see that that there is so much creativity and collaboration around these topics, right? We talked about fragmentation, and we see fragmentation in many areas, but we see a lot of collaboration at the same time, because I guess the issues of today require us to really look at things at a global scale, not just in isolation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love the way that you put that. And it's good, people are still collaborating, and the discussions are still happening. So well put. And look, I want to talk a little bit about how this relates to even some of the things that we're dealing with in supply chains and just business in general. And look, Justin, you and I have talked quite a bit about how organizations have gone through this inflationary cycle, and now they're transitioning, and we have this deflationary cycle. And look, if I was leading a service organization, if I was leading a business, I mean, my head would be spinning right now. I feel like it's a very, very difficult time for organizations. I mean, demand for products and services is starting to slow. You can't just continue to slash your prices. How do you maintain your margins within the business? And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, as well as we hear more and more people talking about recession fears and things of that sort.
No, it's a great point, Sarang. And I think, honestly, from the time that we spoke beginning of the month, where deflation was kind of the hot buzzword that you were hearing across this, the media and social media, if you will, and a lot of the data was representative of a deflationary movement with respect to prices for goods and services. We're actually seeing the economy much more resilient. And I think, Anne, you probably had a really good viewpoint through that communication with these other global leaders there at the World Economic Forum, because as I read some of the commentary and listened to some of the interviews, recession was actually, I'd say, secondary in terms of priority. Everyone was saying the consumer is strong, the economy is great. I don't see a recession on the horizon. And so it's interesting how the communication amongst leaders and amongst just the global population, when you're looking at it from that perspective, oftentimes differs from the narrative and the data that may be lagging in a certain way. So to your point, Sarang, it does create a significant challenge if you're trying to run an organization. At that point, if I were in their shoes, which do I choose to believe in? How do I choose to invest my money going forward? Do I accept, maybe the macro data, or do I focus on what I know in front of me, what my friends are telling me around me, what I'm seeing on the global scale, whether it be supply chain, whether it be consumer demand, you name it. So I think there's definitely a fine balancing act that needs to take place there. Not to say technology doesn't provide a solid base, no matter which outcome it tends to come to fruition. Because at the end of the day, I think to enable that type of communication and collaboration that Anne was talking about, you need technology. I think that's where, I'll use the example in supply chains. The better connected you are up and downstream within your supply chains, the quicker you can react to changes within the economy, within the consumer itself, the less risk you have on your business and everyone's business up and downstream from you.
Yeah. No.
I could just support what you said, Justin. I mean, when in our context, when we talk about helping clients to transform, it's always about people, process, and technology, right? And on macro level, when it matters about the world, right? Again, like climate change, sustainability, economic evolution, things like that. Technology also there plays a role as much as people and processes, right? So that just by itself just underlines, I think, what you said. And for me, on that topic of recession, by the way, there were a couple of discussions around that. It's great to hear that everyone believed that with APJ, especially China opening up, there is obviously a big expectation towards APJ to grow in this year. US seems to be, based on the measures taken, be much more stable and resilient than what was feared at some point in time. And it looks like also Europe, especially towards second half, will recoup. So overall, the trend was actually going slightly up, which was, kind of almost a sense of relief to hear this from really smart people in the room.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I mean, Justin, I think it's important that you made the connection to supply chain. I mean, and in any of your sessions where they focused on supply chain bottlenecks or even things like, trade restrictions. I mean, look, there's all sorts of geopolitical issues going on throughout the world, and some of it is very concerning. And look, I just want to understand, what were the discussions around supply chain bottlenecks easing? What about, restrictions around the world to be able to move inventory in and out? I mean, I think it's one thing to be able to have solutions to be able to plan for inventory, but if you're dealing with bottlenecks, I mean, your planning cycle even becomes a little bit different.
Very much so. I mean, addressing, challenges across the different industries is definitely part of the 5-day program at the annual meeting, and manufacturing is definitely an important part of the agenda. And when you looked at it, also me in preparation, where to attend, because you really have to make tough choices. There's so many things that you want to actually engage in. Things like, nearshoring versus offshoring, obviously, was a big topic. And I guess no surprise here, the answer is not one or the other, right? I think you just have to think about how can you overall help yourself to increase your resilience. And that's to some extent helping to double down on really important partnerships, which is probably then closer to your heart, closer to your business, closer to where you manufacture. And on the other side, how can you, though, in certain areas where you can allow probably for more risk, diversify more and spread your risk across more players, right? So it's not one size fits all strategy. It's kind of trying to look for a balance of how can you double down in the right areas on the right partnerships. And how can you at the same time allow for yourself to get more flexibility as and when you need it? Because we've seen obviously the latest, obviously again with COVID and the war now in the Ukraine, that we need to have multiple strategies, and we need to revisit these strategies over and over again, right? And therefore, I that was one aspect. The other aspect that was very important is, how does the topic about decarbonization, net zero, and sustainability actually plays into the need of thinking, do I really have to manufacture things always thus far away, from where I actually need the products later on? And are there not smarter ways, to help us to reduce carbon footprint? And here as well, it almost, connects back to the topic of circular economy. So how can you actually think in a different way other than the traditional way of linear production, going then into circular economy topics, where you then even think completely about potentially even changing the products, because you think about how can you recoup them later on, from your customers, refurbish them, remanufacture them, and put them back into the economy out there. So, all sorts of different things, whether this is about, sourcing and different, considerations there, nearshoring, offshoring, sustainability, circular economy. I mean, this was all very vividly discussed.
I'm curious too, and Justin, I want to get your thoughts on this. Even recently, I've had a lot of discussions with service leaders around, okay, if you are going to move from a linear model to a circular model, is that just sort of an evolution of manufacturing? Is that an evolution of a service organization, or is that fundamentally changing the way that you're doing business? Look, and I would tend to say on the side of, I think it's a big shift in your business. Everything from, financially, how is that going to impact your company? How do you do accounting for things like this? And you brought up a great point about the sustainability piece, and I think there's a balance point there with the financial impact. But I want to get both of your thoughts around this evolution versus, fundamentally changing the way that you're doing business.
It's a great point, something that you brought up. And a lot of times what we talk about in forums like this, or just engaging conversations with service leaders, it's one thing to say it, but to actually implement it and bring it to life is I mean, it can require change management that goes all the way up to the board of directors with how you're running the business. Like, that's the significance of it, because you're literally changing the business structure and how you operate today from a manufacturing support and services perspective. And to me, I think, Anne brought up several, points with respect to the World Economic Forum that were discussed today. The recessionary fears, carbon emissions on a global scale, global warming. I think for me, when I hear about circular economy and that type of business change, it simplifies down to, well, I'm going to try to streamline at least my thoughts here. So I want to extract the most value out of a particular asset with the least amount of waste throughout its entire life cycle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be different for every asset, for every component. Sure. And I think that's how it's not a one size fits all across every industry, across every component that's on a particular asset. And, when, and you brought up a point where how do you just, think outside the box and change the way that you're doing business in a way, the first thing that jumped into my mind was 3D printing, honestly, where how do I just hit print and then all of a sudden I eliminate the whole logistics needs, and an asset ends up, or a component ends up at the customer for, a service installation, whatever it may be. Maybe a field service tech has a 3D printer in their van. Those are the opportunities down the road in the future where how do you eliminate any sort of waste? Again, going back to extracting the most value out of the asset with the least amount of waste throughout its entire life cycle. And so I think looking at it through that lens, Sarang, it does create a complex business decision that you need to make. And I think a lot of it also comes back to design for service and support. That's fundamentally, I think, where a lot of companies recognize huge gaps. I know myself, coming from customer support as well, I could get on a megaphone and yell every single day, and a lot of my input would still be ignored to a certain extent. So there's a lot of aspects with respect to the business change, both financially and as well as just how you work from a process and people perspective as well, and that technology as well. So I think it really brings together those three pillars that Anne had brought up earlier.
I think more organizations are also starting to realize, look, the business that they're in, the products that they're selling, a lot of times they're a commodity, right? So how do you actually differentiate in a very competitive market? Well, a lot of times it could be through your aftermarket services, through your service organization, to bringing new business models, new service models to the market and being able to bring it there rapidly. I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking with the president of the Deutsche Telekom service organization, and he said something really interesting to me. He said, look, when I'm looking at different software solutions, I don't want to understand the pieces of functionality that you have. I'm sure everything that you're doing is great and adds a lot of value to the business. But look, I want to be able to partner with software vendors that are going to give me a platform where I can bring new business services, new service offerings to the market rapidly. He said you need to be able to do that very quickly. So I think more and more organizations are going to be going down that path and thinking about that. And look, I feel like if you're not making investments in your service organization in this space, then it's just going to be a harder hill to climb in the future. And I'm curious about your thoughts as well, Anne.
Yeah, absolutely agree with all what you said. I think what I noted down in one of the sessions was the impact is fundamental to how businesses are operating. I mean, it's a capability topic, so which can be addressed by technology, traceability, digitalization of processes and things like that. But the second thing is the way that products are to be designed. They are to be designed to actually help support different commercial models, consumption models, right? And so you need to have service in mind when you design the good, right? So that's kind of a bit of a paradigm shift. And the third point that I found very interesting is that it creates, so the enablement of the circular economy requires us to think in a different way, which means that potentially competitors become partners, so co-opetition, in order to realize efficiencies, to realize, opportunities that come across with a circular economy, right? And in that regard, definitely, it's not just a simple tick in the box, kind of a button that you need to push, and there you are, from traditional linear supply chain over circular economy. No, it's a paradigm shift. And we had some great examples during the WEF where there were companies, that were talking about examples of how it really shifted their entire organization from concrete KPIs, a concrete, different values that were set up, and all the way to really these design principles, even from the start of the design of a product that changed throughout. And it's quite impressive to see how all of these things are though very, very real and very doable, right? It's not that we talk about futuristic things. The technology to enable these shifts are absolutely accessible and available. Now, the question is, how are organizations able to adopt and consume, technology like this?
Absolutely.
If I could jump in
to
the Ann said, because I think it's really important as well. Where you said, competitors can become partners, and the immediate thought that I had when you said that, Ann, was, if I'm a global company and my assets are hard to transport, well, the purpose of a circular economy, you're extracting the most value with the least amount of waste, recycling these components over and over again, is the value that you receive from a carbon reduction by reusing or recycling that part, offset then by the transport cost to actually bring the asset to an MRO shop or a depot shop. And so I think that's where I see a very large opportunity across multiple industries, because your partners with respect to depot or MROs now become your trusted advisors, your partners in service in that manner. And I think as the OEMs, as the manufacturers, obviously from a product knowledge and understanding perspective and repairability perspective, you're going to lead the way with that technical knowledge. And so then I think it becomes that balancing act of how much are you sharing with your partners? What does success mean for the whole network as a whole, while still protecting intellectual property? So it's a very interesting paradigm that we're kind of moving towards, where these relationships are really evolving. But I think from my perspective, what I've seen is a lot of companies are recognizing it, both on like the repair shop side and the manufacturing side. And so, while I'm sure there's going to be some resistance or reluctance along the way to change, it's just kind of human nature. It's nice to see everyone, and I imagine global forums like the World Economic Forum are helping to promote this, but a lot of people are moving in the same direction. So very exciting to see.
And look, we've got a sort of a comment from our audience. I mean, and it goes right into what you were saying, Justin. I mean, is this simply just embracing service evolution, or do you need to engineer this change, right? Do you need some thought leaders within an organization that say, look, we're going down this path? Yeah, there might be a financial impact, an immediate financial impact, but this is better for our organization. This is better for the economy. This is better for the world. We need to work together to be able to drive this change forward. And it goes back to even the overall theme of the annual meeting, right? Cooperation in a fragmented world. So I think that's spot on. Excellent. So look, we're about 2 minutes left in the session. I want to thank everyone for the thought leadership today and just the different ideas. Like, I don't know if anyone has all the perfect answers yet, but it seems like there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of people coming together to figure out what does the new service economy look like. Look, I'll open it up. I don't know if there's any other questions from the group. I'm just looking at the comments section here. Okay, doesn't look like it. So, Justine, I think we're good to close out for the day.
All right, here I am. I'm back. Thank you all so much. That was incredibly insightful. Thank you everyone who attended today. The recording will be available on our LinkedIn page. Please feel free to share this if you found it really helpful. If you learned a lot today, or you think somebody else would enjoy watching, please make sure that you share. If you aren't already following our LinkedIn page, make sure you do that, so then you are updated when we have our next Synchron LinkedIn Live event. Thank you all, and with that, I guess we'll close it out.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.